Can you speak to the importance of being held?
We all want to know that there are people who have our backs, who hold us, and we're willing to hold them in a literal and a metaphorical way. So in that sense, you get the benefits of where the attachment system of our civilization is. But from a, let's say, whole systems perspective, where you pull back and you realize that humanity is a single organism, what we imagine how we might feel if humanity, there was a deeper level of safety and trust, would lead to a significantly deeper experience of feeling safe in the world, and therefore we're actually impacted by what's happening.
Welcome back to the show.
It's good to be on the couch.
It's on the proverbial couch.
How the couch has evolved over the last 100 years.
Yeah, and I feel grateful. I feel like I've been sitting on many a couch with you recently and having some incredible dialogues about what it means to do this work. Mm-hmm. And I'll say this again, like, I feel so grateful to be here learning from you and to have the privilege and the opportunity to ask you questions. Because I truly feel like there's very few people I've met on the path who have an embodied understanding of how this body of work works. I feel like there's so much misinformation and there's so much cultural, narratives and there's so much noise. And so I'd love to just bring it back to, like, if you think about the fundamentals, we were just speaking about attachment trauma and attachment wounding. Like, one, why is it hard to heal attachment trauma by yourself? I'd love to start there because I think there's this attachment to doing the work and choosing the modality and going to the psychedelics and doing the meditations, but ultimately that's not touching the root. And so I'd love to start there and just maybe set a frame from that.
Right. Well, I mean, what we mean by healing attachment is about obviously healing a multi-generational traumatic process. So I think the first thing to realize is it's multi-generational. And so we tend to psychologicalize things, and when you do that, it's a useful frame. But there's also larger frames of recognizing that what we're talking about here is cultural and civilizational as well. So I think that's important, and that.
Can you extrapolate on that for a second, even by saying, like, when you say attachment trauma is multi-generational,
right?
Can you just speak to what you're actually saying? Because
Sure. So this would be psychologically transmitted, but the effects of it would also become like genetic as well, right? So what I mean by that is there's a term in Buddhist psychology. They often say, well, this has happened since beginningless time, meaning like we don't know like where that process began, right? Maybe it's just part of the evolutionary process itself. But by multi-generational, if we mean that the traumas of our great-great-great-grandparents, so to speak, and how they related to their children, and how those children then internalized those relational patterns and then passed it on, that's passed on within family systems, right? So that's like it's a passing on of behaviors. But of course, those behaviors then affect genetics as well over time. So by cultural, we mean, let's say the culture is the interior of the collective, right? So the family culture is an interior. You can't necessarily see it. but it's about certain ways of talking and certain ways of behaving that are transmitted in each of our listeners' families. So that there's that. And then the civilizational structures are let's look at, for instance, our civilization and how clearly we value the military-industrial complex over the educational complex, right? So that's that's a civilizational structure that is perpetuating, it's an expression of cultural dysfunction that's now become a structure. So we're talking about a multi-generational, cultural civilizational process that affects our psychology and our biology, our chemistry, even to our chemistry, right? Does that give you it's a big deal, because what we're talking about with the attachment system is, do we feel safe, right, in a deep way? And of course, there's a degree of feeling. So what the attachment system does is provide a sense of deep trust and safety in your life, and the ability to attune to your own nervous system in such a way that you're able to organize your experience. You're not overwhelmed by experience. The ability to cognitively reflect on your experience in such a way, like a good parent would a good parent would ask you questions like, how are you feeling, or what do you think about that? And the ability to make those reflections with your own experience is also part of that attachment system.
Yeah.
So like reflections that are supportive of self-healing and growth. And also just the ability to, let's say, have a GPS for your soul, like, oh, I really see myself, and therefore I know which way to go in life. So all that's still the attachment system. Now, you can heal in therapy the attachment system up to a degree to become a functioning member of a dysfunctional culture. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right. So you've now you become a fully functioning member of a completely dysfunctional situation. So in that sense, you get the benefits of where the attachment system of our civilization is, so to speak. But from a whole systems perspective, where you pull back and you realize that humanity is a single organism, from that perspective, whenever you see there's only one war on the planet, it's not like there's lots of different wars. It's just the one war, the one conflict. So humanity is still at a place where we don't feel safe with ourselves.
Yeah.
And so the deeper what we imagine the mammalian body, like how we might feel if humanity was there was a deeper level of safety and trust with humanity itself, would lead to a significantly deeper experience of feeling safe in the world, because there's no way that you can actually feel safe if people are being blown up.
Yeah.
Where if you're wanting to, if our listeners are wanting to grow into a level of planetary awareness, so to speak, then you have to recognize that you're opening yourself up to the fact that we are part of a whole, and therefore we're actually impacted by what's happening.
Yeah. And
so that's a larger frame.
Yeah. And to bring that even back to, I love what you said, like you can get to a certain level of safety in therapy or whatever the modality is.
Sure.
Right. But you're still inside of a dysfunctional culture, society.
Mm-hmm.
And so can you speak to the importance of bringing others into your process or
Right.
including others
Right.
inside of your work?
Right. So if we think of the frame of the hero's or the heroine's journey, which is the kind of archetype. We recognize it as the archetypal story, so to speak, which in some senses we're all on, right? We all left the village a long time ago, right? This is where in Star Wars it would be like in a galaxy far, far away, we left the village, right? And so we're all in the heroic journey of modernity, so to speak, which is really about individuation, becoming an individual, which, well, as you know, that's a really important part of healing. Like you have to become an individual. But in the kind of proto myth, we only get to give our gift when we come back to the village.
Mm.
But if there isn't a village, then you can't give the gift.
Mm-hmm.
So a necessary part of the hero's journey is the recognition that we can't do it alone, so to speak, and that actually that attachment piece can't be healed just in a dyadic relationship, right? It's because if you imagine in that kind of ancient future village of 120 people, how many attachment threads you would have had, then trying to like get that resolved with just one person or by yourself is impossible. It's not, right? Because it's real.
Well, it's like even for me, like if I can speak to like my journey, like certain types of wounding presents itself in certain types of relational structures. It's like with my intimate partner, like she brings out a certain type of wounding.
Yes.
With my business partners, they'll bring out a different type of wounding.
That's right.
With my colleagues, with my team members, with just being in community, like each of these relational structures are all touching different parts of my psyche, and they're bringing out different elements that get to be liberated.
That's right.
That I can't actually access
It's
if
impossible.
I'm just in one mirror or looking at myself.
No, it's impossible. So exactly. So part of let's say the next phase or the next chapter, there's a certain point where you realize, oh, I can't do this alone, and I have to build a clan. Like that, this has to happen at a level of, let's say, clan. I don't know, like 12 people. Like there's a certain size where that can then be held.
Can you speak to the importance of being held?
Wow. Well, I think we all want to know that there are people who have our backs, right? Who hold us, and we're willing to hold them in a literal and a metaphorical way. Like who are our brothers and sisters that we will allow them to like literally hold us, and literally, and then also hold them. I guess the other question is it would be like, who are those group of people that you would be comfortable dying into their arms? Because that's like, if we go way back in time, it was probably a certain size of, in a very deep part of our psyche, there was a certain, let's say, survival clan size. And of course, that wasn't bound by the legal binds that we have now of marriage and all of that. It was like survival clan. And those were the other mammalian animals that that held us, right, and rocked us, and in a really basic mammalian animal way. So I think that's what I mean. It's like last night I woke up early, like 2 a.m, and I went downstairs, and I got 3 dogs, and they were all like rattling their cages, and I let them out, and they all like jumped on the couch with me. So it's that level of mammalian, like, right?
Yeah, it's just, as I felt,
Right.
just like puppy love.
Yeah,
just
puppy
coming
love.
at you.
It's puppy love, right? It's like it's your puppy pile. It's our puppy. We all like what a puppy pile feels like, but it's like,
How does that translate? So there's like the physical safety that's just a core component of being able to access deep states. But I feel like we're in a day and age where it's like psychological safety in some ways is like I'm curious if you can speak to even that piece of like, how do we create deep psychological safety with ourselves and each other?
with each other. It's a great question. I think to the extent, obviously, that there are practices that help facilitate that, related to healing attachment pieces, you know, depth of embodiment, practicing attunement. The way that I do that in my community is that those practices are the foundational contemplative practices. And what do we mean by contemplative practices? In a really simple cultural way would be what if we come together in a circle, what is the same thing that we're all doing? So the way that a tribe builds safety is through, if we're in a tribe and we all dance the same dance and make the same movements, the function of that kind of level of ritual is, as mammals, is we see that everybody's on the same page. And of course, that can be as simple as like making grunting noises and dancing, but that can become more, more sophisticated. And that's also then true of inner processes together. So, contemplative practice, if you will, or is like together recognizing certain shared dimensions of our experience that, if you did it individually, would turn the attachment system on. But if you do it collectively, you create that the group's recognition that you are that you're together in that shared that shared space.
It's almost like a normalization, like it's okay.
Yes, right.
It's okay to be you. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to be seen. It's okay to feel flawed. It's okay for all of these aspects of self to be here.
Right.
And there's
That's right.
a shared recognition that it's like me doing this for you is me doing this for myself. Because
that's right. And so those become when those become the foundational practices of a new cultural operating system. So when we recognize that what we are tasked to do at this time is to consciously rebuild and redesign our culture and civilization, starting from our more intimate, close, when that's the task, in order that we can consciously heal those very simple dimensions of the psyche. And what's interesting is that there's a relationship between the healing of the the earliest healing, and the natural access to the deepest states of consciousness that the contemplative traditions point to. Meaning, the reason why people don't experience the kind of experiences that the mystics have talked about is because of the degree of fusion with those early childhood injuries. So the more those early childhood injuries are dissolved, the easier the kind of the childlike openness, right? And expanse and joy, bliss that is there in the infant can actually flow through and into the adult. So it's not necessarily that the kind of healing or cleaning up the past process is actually separate from really deep, what we might call spiritual realization. Actually, when it's done the right way, they're inseparable. However, if you don't have that understanding, then you might do practices that will generate that state. But by generating that state, you're not actually working through the very things that are stopping you having
that state
all the time.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you get it. Yeah.
It's, I'm like coming back to a memory of, remember when I was earlier on in my path, like when I just, wanted to start meditating, downloaded a Headspace app, and just started going down this path. I couldn't sit still for more than 3 minutes.
Sure.
Because I had all sorts of things that weren't cleaned up that I wasn't aware of. I had no frame for.
Yeah.
And then I told myself I was actually a bad meditator.
That's right.
Or because that was my narrative, that there's something wrong
right.
with me. And that was also those early childhood program. And so it's like, there's this like need for understanding that there's nothing actually wrong with us. There's these constructs that are inside of us.
That's right.
Right. And so can you speak to just a frame for individuals who, who I can already I think of like so many human beings in my life who, are so passionate about these different practices, but they haven't done the cleanup work yet. And I feel, and I remember you explaining this in a way that was so approachable, like why it's so important to do the cleanup work. If you truly are passionate about some of the work that gets you to deeper states of access.
Well, I think the best frame is relational, meaning that those deeper states that become deeper traits are related to the depth of relational capacity that one has. And that's got to do with maybe in a simple way, like how loving you are. And the first because it's actually all of the world wisdom traditions agree that it is the blossoming of the heart, if you will, that's what's being referred to in the mystical traditions. And that heart, our hearts, have a wisdom dimension as well as a feeling dimension. And so the higher state, how to say this? Development unfolds. So you can be, it's going to unfold anyway based on life circumstances and complexification. So if a seed has been growing for a certain amount of time with certain environments, it's going to have a certain degree of complexity. But that doesn't mean that that degree of complexity has been grown in the right soil. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's like that it's the heart that's like that's expanded. So if we like, okay, so what we're talking about is how does the heart grow up, and how does the heart root down, and how does the heart grow wider? Because you can develop as an ego, and you can grow wide, you can do all those things, but it's actually that the center of all of that isn't actually your heart, it's actually your mind. So part of it is making sure that that we're like that it's the right process that's engaged, because they might look the same, but they don't smell and taste the same, right? Because, and it's said it's important to understand that in the world's mystical traditions, it's understood that you can actually get significantly along the path from the mind. So that's what I mean by that is that the Sith move is real. and so it can look like all the things that, like, oh, breath work and all of these things, all of these parts of let's say the self-growth world, they can all be used to facilitate selfishness as well. Quite a way along the path. So what I'm saying, so the first thing is it's the heart that really matters. And then essentially in terms of relationality, what we're talking about is how deep has our love descended to be able to hold all the different parts of the self that are suffering. And so that's about like developing a deep degree of friendship with one's own experience.
Being your own best friend.
Yeah, being your own best friend. And so that starts with like parts work, right? So on the therapist's couch, talking to different parts, right? So talking to your inner mother, your inner father. But of course, as you go deeper, that you realize, oh, my inner father and my inner mother have also made of parts, and they're also made of parts, and they're also made of parts, until essentially there's the recognition that actually the depth of your body is holographic with the whole of the planet, meaning the depth of your parts, all of your cells, and going deeper and deeper and deeper, that includes everybody and everything. So to bring that back super simple, it means how deep is our love and our ability to embrace and stay with the parts of ourselves that we're not comfortable with.
I think there's and I'm even just hearing it, like, feels like culture is so obsessed with transcending the mind. And what I'm even hearing you express so eloquently is like befriending the mind, and through the heart. It's like instead of going up and out, it's actually coming back in to the experience.
That's right.
And to feel what's here, and to build greater levels of intimacy with ourselves. And by doing that, we actually become the versions of ourselves that we so aspire to be in our friendships and our relationships, at least the types of people that we would want to be around.
That we grow into who we want to become.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I think so. And when it's understood that our hearts, i.e. the depth of our embrace and how deep we're willing to hold our own experience, but also others, then what happens is, what we know is quite literally that begins to cohere the brain. So electromagnetically, the brain is cohered into the field of the heart. The heart itself then as growth unfolds, it's unfolding from that degree of coherence, right? So all the neuroplasticity and the growth is unfolding now from that space. And that then goes through a developmental process that leads to a kind of planetary awareness, because actually even the heart itself is literally in resonance with the electromagnetic field of the planet. So the heart itself, the interesting thing about the heart is it goes high and it goes deep. So the heart unfolds in wholeness, like a circle, and a circle is already whole, but a circle can get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Like the wholeness can expand, as opposed to something that might be just a linear a line, right? And so the developmental process of our hearts, as it unfolds into wholeness, and that's what then includes like, oh, the whole planet, and so on and so forth. So you begin to get a very particular kind of cognition that understands. When we talk about holistic, that's actually it's like a level of technical it's a real level of development that has a technical dimension in terms of even how you think.
So it's almost like as the heart expands into greater and greater levels of wholeness, it expands your capacity to see, understand, and integrate perspectives of wholeness.
Correct.
And so it can't be done the other way, because the heart is what's connected to all that is.
In a living way. That's right. And so we're at a moment in time on our planet where it's a big transition. It's the end of a time, in the sense that we're not going to be using a Gregorian calendar in 50 years. If it's just not with AI. AI is going to be like, I don't think that this is. So we're at an end of a whole cycle. We're end of a whole cycle with degrees of complexity and challenge that are planetary. So if your heart is really concerned about the whole, at this point we realize that actually it's a whole, our listeners, if they have some degree of wisdom, they realize it's a whole system. That's like, at this point, we have to realize that we either work out how the whole system is healthy or it breaks down. And so when you get to that level of concern, so to speak, in your heart mind, that level of compassion, then what will come online is that level of cognition with the level of solution of that degree of complexity.
That's so good.
Because you're concerned about it.
There's a level of, like, I find for myself, like, there's a depth of care that inspires a depth of problem solving.
Correct. Right.
Like devotion and care.
Sure.
Then
exactly.
inspires a whole wave of resourcefulness.
Exactly. So no matter what field, and if you're if you're in technology, if you're in medicine, if you're in architecture, if you're in economics or finance, that the heart's intelligence, as it expands, developmentally in terms of its complexity, but also in then the solutions will reveal themselves, but they reveal themselves because of the depth of your concern for the whole.
This brings it back to why cleaning up and addressing the attachment trauma is just so important. It's almost like that's the gateway into the heart. Do you feel that?
Yeah, I mean, yes, because it's got to do with it's fundamentally it's about trusting the sacredness of the world. The attachment system is, at its depth, it is what gives you the experience of faith. Right? And it's the depth of faith that engages, and trust that engages synchronicity, and it's the degree of distrust and separation that engages like that the world isn't working for you. And what I mean by that is that I think the degree to which we deeply trust our lives, and by trust here means something akin to faith, right? So when the attachment system is healing, we experience deeper and deeper levels of trust and faith in life. And when that happens, it's like the seed of our heart is penetrating deeper into the field, deeper into the ground. And when that happens, rather than repetition compulsion, which is essentially, and we've all experienced this in our lives, where we somehow repeat traumas and the kind of same traumatic situation with the same characters of people get drawn into our lives again and again. Rather than that, what happens is life starts to unfold in a different way. And that's because the planet itself also has a heart.
Mm-hmm.
The anima mundi, like the soul of the heart and the soul of the world, if you will. And as we begin to trust the world and life more, essentially what happens is the world, that intelligence that appears to be outside is like, oh, okay, you need some resources. And so it begins to feed through circumstances and through people and situations, and we call that synchronicity. But what synchronicity is basically how the dynamic unfolding intelligence of the heart unfolds, because the heart isn't actually your heart or my heart. It's essentially like the heart, right? It's holographic. So we're talking about the heart of the planet or the heart of a solar system or the heart of a galaxy. It's the same intelligence.
Is it a part of the evolutionary path to trust the heart? Because I feel like if I even think about me, and as you're speaking, I feel like I'm at a moment in my journey where I am operating more from this space and trusting that if I jump off the cliff, there'll be wings that sprout, or there'll be a plane that catches, or there'll be a resource that arrives, or there'll be something that emerges. And as I lean into that depth of faith and self-trust and trust in the divine, trust in life, trust in my heart, it's like the mind brings forth the fears and the gripping. So is there ever a point where you actually complete that cycle of the mind, or is it part of the function of life to have the mind be in some way, shape, or form
At odds?
just at odds with the heart?
I don't think so. I think that what we're talking about here is how does the personality, let's say like the meat vehicle, become conditioned by soul? And so that was always understood as a particular part of the path. So one thing is becoming a well-integrated personality. That isn't the same thing as integrating the personality into the soul. Right, so that's the integration of the personality and the soul, which would be, how does this body-mind become more and more conditioned so it learns how to even think the way that a soul would think, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting.
Yeah, so yes, the mind, I mean, the deeper the realization, even the mind is then pulled into the field of the heart. And maybe that's one way of gauging where you are in the journey is are your cognitive processes themselves beginning to be like turned to become more altruistic or more we based? Like if you look at how your mind is thinking, is it thinking about the I as a we, right? So that level of transformation is a level of training. You actually have to train the mind and a little bit to start thinking differently.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a lot easier to do if you're having the direct experience. So that's the challenge, is you can have the direct experience of kind of deep interconnectivity and love and connection, and still be running code in the mind that thinks the same way.
Mm. So what is the process of rewriting the code? Is it feeling the depths of fear?
Well, yes, you got to do the cleaning up work. So that's the kind of going down, and coming into deeper levels of relationship with experience, so that you have a deeper level of presence, but you can still think like an asshole. So there's a lot of people in the that's people who are like deeply embodied, but actually, if you looked at their thought processes, they're still as like self-absorbed as they ever were. It's just now they're just really embodied, relaxed, and healed wankers. Right? And we all know them, because it's part of us as well. But right, like that. So that's a thing. So no, it's not to do with feeling. It's to do with that phase of the growth. Literally has to do with cognition, like literally learning to think differently.
Yeah.
And that's got to do with growing up, as opposed to healing. Like thinking differently. You think differently when you're a child as to when you're an adult, when you're a father, like, so to speak. Like, you have different levels of responsibility. You have to take on responsibility and think about other people. So growing up is just a continuation of that, of like taking more perspectives, such as it changes how you think.
It's like clicking for me right now. So like, I remember, the developmental stages of waking up, growing up, cleaning up, and showing up. So it sounds like growing up is the multi-perspectival nature of your reality. Like, how many more perspectives can you hold that are more in alignment with the soul and the heart? Cleaning up is going into the body and clearing out the bound energies that are present.
Yeah.
Then what would you categorize waking up and showing up as? Like, what aspects of the psyche or
so these are three different processes. Healing, because it isn't just about cleaning up. Sometimes cleaning up involves actually rebuilding structures, but healing relates to individuation. So that's like, in order to become a whole individual, you got to do that healing work, because that's what, if we don't do the healing work, we're fused, right? So the cleaning up or the descent, that's involves basically freeing us from the past. Okay. Growing up has to do with maturing into the future, and essentially, basically, like, say, being aligned with what's unfolding right now. Because if you're actually aligned with what's unfolding right now at the edge of culture, you'd already be thinking from a planetary perspective, because it would be pretty obvious that we have like that the AI is not going to be like bound by nation state. So you're already going to be thinking that way, right? So growing up, more perspectives to be able to see what's unfolding and where we're headed to in the future. And of course, if you don't have the level of upgrade, if you don't have Windows 4.0, 5.0, you're not actually seeing what's happening. You're behind the curve. So like growing up is keeping you present and seeing what's happening in real time, so to speak, right? Waking up, that's related to neither the past nor the future. It's about actually like moving beyond any structure of time altogether. So does that make like transcending time? But you see, you can transcend time, and you can teach that, transcend. That's what a lot of awakening practices do. But if you're not teaching that integrated with actually cleaning up the past, then you're a poopy diaper, right? There's a bunch of poop, and if you're not including like waking up and orienting to the future, then you're sitting underneath the tree and watching Rome burn and saying how everything is a non-dual experience. When actually, like, those three are integrated, right? So if we understand how those three are integrated, that actually life is about, we need to heal, we need to grow up and take responsibility, and then we need to kind of wake up and actually realize that our identity is beyond any form. When you then do that, then you begin to realize that you have responsibility for the whole. Each of us has a responsibility to serve, and in fact, actually, your healing and awakening and growing is in service to that healing. And we could call that showing up. That's got to do with, like, how are you bringing that into the world in service? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I think that's what's so brilliant, because what I love about the way that you synthesize everything is it's almost like it's bringing the esoteric in touch with the attachment system, in touch with relational dynamics, it's like it's a fully integrated way of growing through life, that feels important, actually, to like really, because I'm kind of done with this fragmented nature of the inner work, where it's like there's so much, like there's psychedelics over here, there's therapy over there,
Right.
It's
Sure.
like it's so fragmented and broken out, and people think that they're making progress by doing one thing
Sure.
over and over and over again.
Sure. I mean, we all do that, don't we?
Right, we've all done that. I've been on that cycle.
Right.
I've been on
Sure.
that path where I just
Yeah.
keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, instead of having a map of where we're going, why it's important, where I'm at, and how to engage with this whole dance.
Right. That's right.
And I know very few people who are thinking about that problem in that way. And yeah.
Well, okay. First, there is something to be said for the phase of differentiation, like the work that Ken Wilber did, which is like, okay, let's articulate all of these dimensions, right? Waking up, growing up, cleaning up, showing up, not forgetting fucking up, right? and then and then articulating the different practices. So all of that process of differentiation. So there's a phase in the path where you don't know, and you're kind of repeating. And there's a phase of differentiating and seeing all of those pieces. But that then isn't the same thing as actually how they then all integrate, not into different pieces, but actually into a single process. So if that makes sense, where essentially they synthesize into a particular way of journeying where all of that happens simultaneously. But for that to happen, you have to first be aware of these different dimensions, and then you have to understand the kind of the engineering behind the different practices and what they're trying to do, and then you can re-engineer the practices to do all three or four simultaneously. And I think that's where we need to go, because that we're running out of time, quite literally, but we're running out of time, and so we need vehicles of practice that can cover a lot of distance.
Yeah.
Right, as quickly as possible. Like, it needs to do the healing work and awakening and maturing, and it needs to happen in community all at the same time. Because we don't have another 30 or 40 years
To just flounder away.
to flounder. Yeah, because we are here based on the methods that we've been using thus far. Right, like, we're not going to get any further, because that's like, this is where we're at. So it's good for us to realize, like, oh, we don't get any further based on the way that we're going about doing it right now. Because if we did, we wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
as a community.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's why I'm passionate about your work, John.
Thank you.
And I'm passionate about, bringing these conversations forward, because I think it's this type of work, the deep, true, integrated inner work that isn't necessarily about any one path, but more about the way.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
And to educate people about the way feels like some of the most important work we could be doing right now. And I just really honor you and recognize you as a map maker. Like, you're one of the minds that I go to learn from, and to sit in humble listening with, because I really do appreciate the depth that you're willing to go to in your own practice, which then allows for you to bring back some of these constructs and these maps for others to follow. And so I'd love for you to share a little bit about Planetary Dharma and what's here and what's most alive in your world.
Yeah, thank you. Well, my wife Nicole and I, we run a ongoing school called Planetary Dharma that offers a multi-year program. I think the next cohort begins actually in the fall of 26. Although we offer kind of outer ways of engaging with what we're doing. In the meantime, I think we have an open retreat called Embodying the Open Ground coming up in the beginning of next year, which really basically is about showing how the depth of attachment work and contemplative practice integrates. So we would offer those practices out to the community. What we're really interested in doing is essentially providing the kind of education for people to have a really deep grounding in, let's say, like the sacred secular, like, what is the sacred humanism approach, kind of trans lineages, if you will. Although to some extent I use quite a bit of languaging from the Buddhist tradition. That's really mainly just because I think it's the best, some of the best stuff that's out there. So if our listeners are interested, they can check us out on planetarydharma.com. And we also offer a whole curriculum called Medicine Dharma, which essentially kind of begins with cannabis work. But really what that does is educate people how to relate to plant medicines from the perspective of becoming practitioners. And that kind of follows like the cycle of the year, the equinoxes and the solstice. So there's kind of 8. So that's kind of like it's adjunct, if you will. But the idea there is to educate people to use slowly but surely different plant medicines from the perspective of being a practitioner, so to speak. So that's also part of our kind of ecosystem of practice.
Beautiful, John. Well, I'm so grateful for our friendship, and
likewise.
And I'm excited for all the collaborations that we'll get to have in the coming years. And again, thank you for just truly devoting yourself to this incredibly important body of work. I have one last question for you. In the midst of everything you're doing, everywhere you've been and everywhere you're going, how do you stay grounded? And how do you, and more importantly, what's a practice that you cultivate or use to just become more embodied and grounded?
Family, puppies, and good food and good company. I think it's that simple.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's fun. You go traverse the world and you come back.
Yeah, I come back to my my family and my kids, my dogs, my wife, living together, that kind of basic human goodness, right? Round the hearth living, right? Like there's something, the sacred hearth, it's a really super important part of being a human being.
Yeah.
That's
beautiful. All right, John. Well, thanks again for being here.
My pleasure.
Everybody, that's a wrap for this week's episode of Stay Grounded. I'm your host, Raj. This is your old friend, John. And from us, stay grounded.
Thank you.
We'll chat soon. Thanks for tuning into this week's episode of Stay Grounded. No matter where you're from or what you're going through, I hope it helps you remember just how incredible you are and have always been. If you're on a path of emotional healing or self-discovery and would like to learn how Liberate can support your journey, head to www.rajana.com/liberate. That is LIBER8 to learn more about our current group programs and one-on-one offerings. I love you guys, and I'll see you next week.